Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining the International Relations Council for today's International Career Series on cross-cultural communication. The International Career Series is designed to help you explore different international career paths, whether you're graduating and entering the job market, looking for a change, or just curious. You'll soon hear from an individual who can share their work in an international field, offering insight into their own educational background, career paths, intricacies of their field, and recommendations for your own search. My name is Natalie Friend. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator VISTA with the IRC. For those unfamiliar, the IRC is a nonpartisan, apolitical organization that provides a platform for greater understanding of international topics and how they intersect with our Kansas City community. We will be recording today's event and broadcasting it live on Facebook. So if you'd like to review this conversation at a later date or share it with someone you think might enjoy it, feel free to visit our YouTube or Facebook page. Today, we are very pleased to be joined by Alexandre Meldem, Vice President of Sales Flyability Inc. in Denver, Colorado. Born a bilingual, dual Swiss and American citizen, Alexander has spent most of his life living in an international setting. Alex's international career started after completing his Swiss military service as a sergeant pathfinder and obtaining a law degree when he moved to the U.S. to attend a graduate program. During his studies at President Clinton's School of Public Service, he realized the value of creating momentum between countries to expand the impact of efforts across the globe. He carried that realization with him in starting his career, managing the U.S. office of two international companies consecutively. Alex is currently in Denver, Colorado, running the U.S. company of Flyability, a Swiss-based leading drone manufacturer for indoor industrial inspection. It is safe to say that Alex has fully engaged in the international experience, and we thank you so much, Alex, for joining us and giving us some of your time. For this event, please feel free to post your questions through the chat feature at the bottom of your screen throughout the program, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible during our Q&A period, when you're also welcome to ask yourself. I encourage you now to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable, so that we can see your faces, but it's okay if you don't. If you would like to connect with us at the IRC, please feel free to log on to our website, irckc.org, which will also be available in the chat box. We encourage you to check it out if you are interested in joining us as a member, receiving our newsletter, or exploring other upcoming events like this one. Thank you so much, and please welcome Alex.
Thanks, Natalie. That's essentially summed up everything I was going to say, I think, in that introduction. But it's really nice to be here. My name is Alex. I work with a company called Flyability. I'm guessing most of y'all never heard about it. We are a Swiss drone manufacturing company, and we build drones that are designed to perform visual inspections in confined spaces or areas that are generally dangerous to people. So we do a lot of work in nuclear power plants and mines, refineries, chemical plants, and also disaster sites. And I'll get more on flyability and what I do there in a minute. But in the meantime, today I was I'm here to I was invited to participate in this IOC presentation, which was really exciting to me because I really love working internationally. It's been something that I've enjoyed in some way, shape, or form for a long time now, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I find it so exciting and so interesting. Tell you a little bit about how I got there, and if time permitting, and if of interest to you, of course, we can talk a little bit about various thoughts I have on working internationally. Now, all in all, the international careers is a very broad term, and I'll expand on that later on. But I guess just for the sake of the conversation, we can say it's working with an international component. It's in my experience, it hasn't always been easy. It's usually been the path, or it usually hasn't been the path of least resistance, but it's always delivered, a great sense of accomplishment in a lot of ways, and also the work itself is rewarding. The results are as well, and I'll get to that more in a minute. I think, when I was preparing this presentation, I was asking myself, okay, well, why is it that I like so much about working internationally? It hasn't really been something I've ever really thought about, but putting thought into it, I came to realize that the really exciting part of it to me, and what drives me to keep international components to my career and everything I do, is that there is always a pretty heavy component of unknown. I never really know what to expect from one day to the next, and there's also a lot of adventure that comes with it. It's new places, it's new people, it's new ways of thinking, new ways of communicating, and that's always been something that's really driven me towards the international world in general. Now, maybe just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am today, and what various events in my life led me to it. Like Natalie was saying, I've always been, or I've always lived with an international component. My mom is from the United States, Arkansas of all places, and my dad is from Switzerland. They had met in Berkeley when they were. My mom was working there, my dad was studying, and fortunately for me, events transpired that led to me being around. We moved to Switzerland pretty soon after I was born, and that's where I spent most of my childhood, which was fairly basic in most ways. I wasn't fantastic in school for the most part, but I was always really interested in learning about history, geography, anything that led to give me a broader understanding of what this world we live on really is and how it works. I when I finished school, so in Switzerland, anybody or any man who is age 18 or older needs to go into the military service for at least a year. There are various ways you can do it. It can be civil service too. But anyway, I spent a year in the army where I did militia. Uh, or I did my militia service as a sergeant in a Pathfinder troop. And while there was not much international component to that, it was a big part of shaping or bringing me out of childhood and into adulthood. I got a pretty heavy sense of discipline there, work ethic, and all of that. And so that did not contribute in any way to working internationally, but it definitely gave me tools that were extremely useful afterwards. One of them is being timely. Working internationally, time is a struggle, and you need to learn to manage it and be aware of it as well, and how it can limit you in your day to day. And that's something I definitely learned from the Army. But anyway, moving out of the Army, I went to law school. In Switzerland, we're fortunate enough to have free education even after school. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get into a fairly good law school for, I think, all 3 years cost me about $3,000 with all the tuitions and exam fees. So it was pretty easy getting through there. I worked on the side 50% and as a security guard of all things. And it was while I was in law school studying international law that suddenly something just clicked in me. Like this whole world works together, and there are rules governing it, and there's a whole system on how everything happens on a global level. And I found that really fascinating. That quickly became my favorite topic, and the only class I really attended through law school. But the lessons that was really the first time I came to realize we're living in a much bigger world than what I'm aware of, and it's all working together simultaneously to bring new things, bigger things to the world. And I just thought that was fascinating. So getting out of law school, I essentially had two choices. One of them, I had been accepted in the police academy in Switzerland to become a detective, which was something I was really interested in doing. And on the other hand, I think just a few months before I had to make this decision, I was traveling to Arkansas to go see my family, and we we had gone to visit the Clinton Museum. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in Little Rock by the Clinton Foundation Center. Anyway, we were waiting for the trolley to take us back downtown so we could get our car and leave. And I had to go to the bathroom. And of all things, I was just walking by this really old big brick building that was a beautiful building, really. And I peeked inside the window, and I saw there a collection of books, and there was a little note next to it saying these are the books that were selected by our students. And out of all those books had were about the world internationally, how we can care for the world and all that. And of course, it turned out to be the Clinton School of Public Service. So after looking into it a little bit, I decided that's for sure beyond a doubt what I want to do. And so shortly after I was accepted there, I decided that that's what I was going to go for, and I moved to Arkansas. It wasn't easy doing the move, and especially figuring out just the funds to get here. I was fortunate to be a dual citizen, so I was able to apply for a financial aid once I got here. And between when I finished my law school and moving to Arkansas, I spent a summer working, still a security agent. I did night shifts in I'm not sure what the term in English is, but anyway, it was this it was a holding facility for people who had committed crimes and who had mental issues. And so I worked nights over there, and the pay was really, really good. So over the course of 2 months, I managed to save up enough to, move out to Arkansas, and then with financial aid, find a place to live. And so the Clinton School was really, I'd say, the element that kind of changed everything for me. So it's a very small university that's tied to the University of Arkansas. What they do is form people to help lead either non-governmental organizations or international giving charities, societies, and governmental branches of international service as well. And that was a 2-year program. While I had traveled quite a bit, especially, growing up in Europe, what's a state away here is a country away there. So I got to travel quite a bit growing up, and but it was always within my comfort zone, I would say. Once I got to the Clinton School, one of the first things they told us is, so within a year from now, you're gonna be leaving to go do a project, somewhere in the world. You need to start thinking about it, figure out where you want to go. And so and at that point I realized I wanted to, travel a little bit, see parts of the world I hadn't seen yet. So I went to South America for my project. But anyway, through the Clinton School, I got to work with a lot of people coming from all over the world. The school drew a lot of international students. And so we had students with us from all over Europe, Africa, Middle East, and South America as well. And so we really got to, I really got to rub with cultures that I hadn't had a chance to really experience before. I made a lot of friends that came from parts of the world I've never been to and barely heard of at the time. And I came to realize that, although we're all brought up differently and we all have different ways of thinking and seeing the world, there are a lot of elements of commonality as well. And there's almost always a way to build a connection with somebody, regardless who they are, where they're from. There is going to be some commonality just due to the fact that we're human beings and we share some of the some of the issues we face in life. And so I got comfortable there working with people from, really anywhere, and especially learning to find that element of commonality that allows me to build a connection with them, to interact with them on a personal level, rather than just remaining at a surface level discussion. So through the Clinton School program, I think I really started getting exposed to the world as a whole, and not just to, the area I grew up in and where I was from and all that, and experience different cultures, learn about them. Again, just once again, I came to this realization that this time for the non-profit side of things, there is also a gigantic machine that's run by thousands of people working together from all corners of the world to try to get a project to fruition, to try to get a result that they want to get, to help people. And it was a beautiful thing to see. We got to work with some of those organizations. We got to interact with some of the people they were helping. And through that, you really start seeing that while the world is a huge place, the fact that we can connect with each other so easily with internet now, and through all the various means we have of interacting with each other, it's really not that big. There are a few, there's, at least in the areas I'm active in now, it's easy for me to make a connection with somebody I want to talk to, just because we have all these means available to connecting to people and interacting with them. While I was at the Clinton School, I also met my wife, and we started living together at that point. Once we were done with school, we we weren't sure what we wanted to do. We didn't have much of a sense of direction or of where we wanted to go in life. So we figured we might as well go somewhere we wanted to be. We moved to Miami Beach, thinking we'd be able to actually build a life over there. Of course, living by the beach was awesome. We went to run on the beach every morning and swim and all that. But after 2 months there, I just realized there's absolutely no way. It's not that there's no opportunity out there. It's just there was nothing for us there. And after those 2 months, we were basically completely out of cash, and we started to realize we were going to have to figure out something different. So what we did was move to New York, knowing that we'd probably have a better luck of finding something we were experiencing over there. And when we got there, I was looking for jobs, and I noticed this one company that was based in Switzerland. It was a negotiation consulting company called the Toronto Negotiation Institute. Institute. They were looking for somebody to, they already had a legal structure in place as a company, but they didn't really have a company per se. And they were looking for somebody who'd be willing, who was willing to take on, kind of the first year of building the local company and getting a system in place basically for it to operate in the United States. I was, the, the owner of the company was in New York when I applied for the job. He said, okay, well, let's just try to meet up. I had absolutely no qualifications for the position itself. Besides the fact that I had done a little bit of international work during my graduate degree, but really not much else besides that. We fortunately kicked it off pretty good. I was talking earlier about you come to realize that there's always an element of commonality. I think that's really what, it ended up getting me that position, was I was able to relate with him at a personal level on some items fairly quickly, and build a relationship of trust that way. So I ended up getting that position. And for the course of a year, it was miserable. Essentially, I was out there on my own with the whole rest of the company in Switzerland, and I was not only trying to, set up a business over there besides the legal structure, but actually get a physical business in place, find some people we could add on to the team, and all that stuff. Aside of that, I was also trying to sell a product that was extremely difficult to sell, which is negotiation consulting. The company itself did, or negotiation training. I mean, we did consulting, and we did consulting with a lot of big companies. So that was the main source of revenue, but the training was also a big component of it. And it was a miserable year. I had to start working every morning at 6 a.m. from my tiny apartment in New York when I didn't feel like taking the subway, which was most days, because man, that was a rough ride. But anyway, it was just a rough experience all in all. And towards the end of that first year I was there, my sister ran into some health issues back in Switzerland, and so I decided I had to go back and give her some support. I let my employer know at the time that that's what I was going to do, and that I was hoping he'd be willing to, give me a position in Switzerland. He was absolutely not. He was extremely pissed off. I was going to bail after only a year, but anyway, it was, family. I didn't really have much of a choice there, so I did what I had to do, and we left Toronto and moved to Switzerland. But anyway, what I did learn during my time at that job, though, was that I was this was my first actual work experience. I had no experience prior to that working in a business, let alone the corporate world. And the people I was having to work with over there were, for the most part, executives at 500 companies with, big names everybody would recognize. And my job was to find a way to get in touch with them, and then find a way to get them interested into the services we were providing, which was not an easy task, but I was still able to do so. And, I ended up speaking with executive level people at huge companies like Microsoft and things like that, just by, again, building on these commonalities I could find every time. And that kind of became my thing. I would find something in common with somebody and build a relationship with that would allow me to do business with them. And while it was a miserable experience, it was also, a really transformative one for me, where I got to learn a lot by being exposed to an environment I'd have never been exposed to before, and also getting to work with people I didn't think I was going to work with ever, really. I was wanting to do nonprofit. Necessity pushed me into doing for-profit work, and I was also fine with it because I wanted to gain some experience before doing more nonprofit work. But anyway, so back to moving to Switzerland. I got to Switzerland without a job and basically without a dime. We managed to find a place to live because we had somebody we knew that had a place we could stay for a month or two. So we stayed there until we got on our feet. And of course, I had to find a new job. So I started looking around, and there was a business development representative position open at the company I work for now, Flyability. I wasn't, enchanted at the idea of doing business development. I never felt like it was my calling, but I knew I'd be good at it because, again, I have, this skill I developed over time of finding commonality and building a connection was basically the job itself. So I started working there. It turns out that the industry Flyability is in is the industry I'm passionate about, and I wasn't even aware of it at that time. So I got really lucky in that sense, just by happenstance, really landing into an industry I'm passionate about. So for, I think, about a year and a half at Flyability, I was, basically doing cold calls day in and day out, trying to figure out, a way to inform people about the drone, and then hopefully convince them to actually acquire it. It was while it wasn't, the best job in the world, it was amazing in so many ways because I was able to work with people all around the world, could use my skill of building connections while doing so. I was fairly good at it too, just because I could build these connections. And so I was able to, you know, um, kind of produce the results I was needing to produce and do a reasonably good job at it. And at some point, the United States was our biggest market. It had historically been for flyability. And we just started to feel a pull from our customers, basically, that to be over there, to be closer to them, to be able to interact with them on their hours. And so, one day I went up to my boss at the time and I said, look, we've mentioned this a few times before, but if you want to open up an office in the United States, I'm game. And so, it was a long process from there. We had a lot of different discussions, and we eventually came to the decision that yes, it is something we're going to do, and that I'll be the one going out there and setting up this office. And well, through the process, we got to identify where we wanted to go, how we wanted to do it. So we ended up in Denver. Um, anyway, and that kind of brings us to today. And I'll dive deeper into my job in just a second because I think it's pretty interesting from an international career perspective. But anyway, looking back at this when I was preparing for today, it just I was trying to find a sense in it all. The way things happen and followed after each other, and there's just none. Every single time I look at a decision I took or a move I made, most of the time it was either there was some opportunity there or a long shot opportunity I was interested in, so I took a leap, or it's just kind of happenstance. I was in need of something, and I took what I got and ended up working out for me. And it's kind of an interesting realization to come to. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just there were opportunities, and I took them when I could, or there was necessity, and I filled them however I could, and it kind of all worked out all right for me, which was as obviously nice, but also just kind of informs me in that best form plan, which for me at the time was becoming a police officer, just probably is going to end up getting thrown up anyway, and that following letting myself kind of go with the flow all ended up paying off for me for the most part. I if I find opportunities, I'd jump on them, and if I had necessity, I'd try to figure out a way to fill it. And it kind of led me to where I am now, which is the next thing I want to get on real quick is my job today, which is really interesting. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting up the office, or the foreign office for Flyability. Last year was a cost center. Essentially, it was just the idea of actually getting the office here, making some sales, which we've done. And now we're at a point where that's happened successfully. So we're going to grow it. We're actually hiring our first employee now, and we're hoping to grow the team to like 5 by the end of the year. Anyway, the position I have today, I'm essentially the really bare bone aspect of it is acting as a bridge between the United States and Switzerland. I'm acting as a bridge between our clients here in America and between the engineers, production, shipping departments, all of that in Switzerland. And while there is difficulties to it, for example, by the time I start working at 8 a.m, I've got about an hour or two to work with my colleagues before I'm left alone for the rest of the day. It's also extremely rewarding because I get to do something I'm really passionate about, which is connecting people. Just today, an engineer asked me if I could find them contacts within a company we want to work with for some of our developments, and I'm excited about doing that later on today, because I know I have a contact that I know somebody who works at that company in the position I'm interested in. So I'm gonna get to spend most of my afternoon again making these connections and trying to find commonalities, finding ways in which a relationship would advantage them and us, and build a relationship from there. And that's I'm doing it with the United States today, but other days I can do it with other regions of the world, be it Europe, Eastern Europe, even Asian countries. It's just and because there's this international component to it, it's every single day is completely different. I'll wake up with about 50 emails from Europe, and I'll end my day with about 50 emails coming in from the other side of the world with people having questions about our product or the work we do together. And I guess that kind of sums up the the aspect of my job today. It really is just acting as a bridge, and yet it's so rewarding because I get to set up the structure, and while the failure will be mine if it fails, the success will also be mine if it succeeds, along with everybody else I'm working, of course. And that's just it's a really nice and rewarding feeling. Of course, I'm fortunate to have a great team that I'm working with from Switzerland too, which makes it so much better. In my previous experience, doing this without a team that necessarily supported me the way I needed it made it very difficult, made the interactions, hard most days, if not impossible on some days. Whereas today, having a much stronger relationship with the team in the first place coming out here makes my job a real pleasure, basically on a daily basis. And I'm really interested in opening this up for Q&A, but I just had a few thoughts I want to share about working internationally before we do that. So, maybe one of the first things is that I think while international business work is fascinating indeed, I felt like I had much more of an impact doing so when I was doing it for a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization that did work in various parts of the world. It felt more rewarding, and also much more direct, because you're working with the people either who are over there doing the work for the nonprofit or the people who are needing the help. And that was a really formative experience in learning how to work internationally. So that's maybe one thing that looking back was extremely useful in getting me to where I am today. And that was just having this one experience where I worked internationally somewhere where it was really boots on grounds, getting a feeling for what worked, what didn't, why it worked and why it did not. And so that's definitely something I would encourage, is just going out on that limb, going out on that adventure, and trying to do something that's going to benefit other people and at the same time benefit you by giving you this international exposure. Another thought I have is that while it's as a kid I'd hear international careers and I was like, wow, that must be so interesting. It's really a double-edged sword. On one hand, like I said, I'm driven by the unknown, I'm driven by adventure, and I get that basically on a daily basis. On the other, I don't, while everywhere is kind of home, also nowhere is. So as an example, just 2 days ago, our young child was sick, where had I been, home per se, where I have family, we could have called on them and had them help us out. Here, we had to figure it out on our own, basically not work on that day so we could watch him. And while it's just one example, it happens in so many instances where most of the time, if you're working internationally and traveling doing so, you're going to be out on your own, and it takes a certain type of personality, and it definitely takes the drive behind it to make it happen. And but again, for me, the sense of adventure and of unknown is always enough to justify the pains that go with it. And then maybe one last thing that was just kind of thinking about how I ended up getting into all this, looking at all the different events that kind of changed how I perceive the world and how I worked. I think travel was a big part of it. Again, living in Europe as a kid, I was able to travel quite a bit by train, by bus, car, all that. So I got to see a bit of Europe. I got to travel a few other places as well in Africa, which was really mind expanding as to, again, how just the fact that this whole world is connected amongst each other, and that it's not out of anybody's reach really to make change happen somewhere completely different than where you are. And then I think one of my strengths, and it goes for my job too, is just when I see opportunity, I don't really question it. I'll jump on it. Most of the time it'll lead to absolutely nothing besides wasting an hour or two on trying to figure something out. But sometimes it yields great results. So I think that was one thing that was extremely helpful throughout, is just when I saw an opportunity, I jumped on it. I didn't really ask myself, am I up to par doing this? Like the job I had with a negotiation company, I didn't really wonder if I had the ability to speak with high level executives at huge companies, because I just decided I'd figured it out and wanted to take that opportunity, and so I did. And then the last thing is that school I went to, the Clint School of Public Service, they had this motto of "We build bridges." That may be one of the biggest things I took from that school, building bridges. The concept and the notion behind it is just so relevant to anything international. It's not just about making a one-off connection. It's really about creating a path that will allow you to go back and forth in the future, to have this ongoing collaboration and interaction with people that's lasting in the long run. And that's the whole concept of building a bridge. It's not just a little rope you cross once and then it's gone. It's a bridge that's going to be there for the future that you can come back and forth on. It's the metaphor is also speaking to me just because, part of the point is of working internationally is trying to build something with somebody else on the other side of the world that has resources that or knowledge that you don't. And while building the bridge can be the connection, it can also just be like building that relationship and building something with somebody. And when people ask me what I do today, for the most part, I like to answer I build bridges, because it's really it feels like it's what I do on a daily basis, is building connections between people and building roads that will be able to be used by the future by our company, our clients, whatever. It's a path that's there and that's lasting for people to use. And I think, but at this point, I've been speaking for a long time now. My mouth's starting to feel dry. If y'all have any questions, I'd love to chat. My next half hour is all yours, so whatever you'd like to know.
Thank you so much, Alex. Really, it's been fascinating to hear about kind of your career path and the different routes that you've been on. I'll start us off with a couple questions, but I encourage our guests and our audience to either submit your questions to the chat or unmute yourself and ask Alex while we have him. So you've worked in a number of different positions and places and had to learn how to adapt to a number of different working environments and offices. What hard or soft skills would you recommend that a young person, so a high school student, a college student, a young professional, really build to be successful in today's international job market?
That's a difficult question, and it kind of depends on the intentions. If the route is to go, or to develop a talent and try to export it somewhere else, then focalizing in that niche is by far, or definitely, the way to go. Getting as much knowledge as possible in that one little sector that you want to specialize in. Highly specialized people are usually attractive people to basically any company around the world, especially if you're coming from the United States and a business is trying to work with the United States or something like that. Having a very focalized area of expertise can definitely be helpful. And I see a lot of people, especially in the drone world, moving back and forth across the globe because they have a very specific skill that every company wants to acquire. So that's certainly one way. But then in terms of what people can do to prepare and open up, I think a language is always helpful. Having one extra language can always be of use. And in fact, I think for most like UN internships and things like that, a second language is required. Mine is French. I can speak a bit of German, and I can dabble in Spanish, although I wish I'd improve that a little bit. It's something I'm working on. But having a secondary language can always be helpful, especially if the country you're targeting has that secondary language as a primary one. And then, interpersonal skills are a pretty big deal, I would say. Regardless really of what the job is, it's going to call for the ability to work with people that are not your team, that are not people you've known or interacted with before, and that are probably of a completely different culture, background, and have a very different view of the world. And that's, how do you develop relationship building? I think it's really just by trying to be genuine with people, being open about who you are, what you can and cannot do. At least transparency for me has seemed to always be helpful in building relationships. Another thing is just, especially coming out of college, being able to show that you have skills, even if it's not, the hard skill of that specific job, is typically an asset. I worked with various student organizations when I was in college, and then in graduate school I got to do these projects internationally. While none of them were relevant at all to any of the jobs I've had since, the fact that I had done it and I could claim that experience was something enough to give a little bit of traction to them considering me for any given position, really. And I was saying that earlier, but opportunity is not only just like, okay, well, I'm going to do action ABC and I'm going to get this out of it. It's also just, you see something you're interested in, you're like, this is cool, this is interesting. You may not get any experience that's actually relevant out of it, but you'll still be able to show and claim that you've done something, which is more than some people can ever claim to have done, especially going through college. And I was talking about that job as a security guard. It really was a a shitty position. Or sorry, it wasn't a great position, but at the same time, it was a job I did at night. So my days were entirely free to do other things like participate in those organizations or study sometimes or things like that. And while it might not seem like a great opportunity, it still was one for me because it freed up my days and I could work at night and just figure out times to sleep at other moments. But I guess when I say opportunity, really, that's what I mean. It's finding something that kind of creates a little spark in you, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's I guess that's what I mean when I say opportunity. And those are the things that, in my experience, are always worth going for. If it triggers even a little bit of interest, it may not be, you may not see an end result that's like, okay, well, it's going to lead me to this point by doing this, but it doesn't necessarily matter because it's going to bring something to you, and you have no clue where it's going to bring you anyway.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Staying open, really to everything, and you'll never know where you're going to end up. You talked a bit about in your time at the Clinton School, surrounding yourself with like a multicultural group of people, and I guess I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about that experience. How you got connected with with a number of different individuals from around the world with different backgrounds. And then the value of those connections and in shaping your ability to communicate and to build bridges, as you say.
For sure. The it was a little bit of a culture shock for me at first. We the United States is or can be a surprisingly diverse country. Coming from Switzerland, of course, there is diversity. As everywhere really in the international world we live in, but there was also just not as noticeable cultures, I would say, or different cultures. And it wasn't people, while they may obviously have been from somewhere else in the world or speak a different language, they didn't necessarily um, cling to their culture like you can see in the United States sometimes, which was at first kind of a shock for me. We had people coming from, like I said, Eastern Europe, Africa, even Afghanistan, and these were all cultures I had never really had a chance to interact with people who actually held on to those cultures. The ability, the fact that we always had some element of commonality, especially at this school, we were all brought there for from a similar drive, made it easy to build relationships with them. And of course, it wasn't anything that I had to get used to or anything like that, because at the end of the day, we're all human. It's a matter of preference, and that doesn't really change the fundamental aspects of anybody. So it took some time for me to learn how to work with them, though. We Swiss are, just like Germans, pretty cut dry, and we expect things to be done in a certain way at a certain time, and that's definitely not the case of, how everybody functions. And that was something I had to get used to. Also, how we interacted with them, the niceties, what was acceptable and what wasn't. These were all things that I had to learn, and I guess they were just learned by interactions and having somebody tell me if I did something that I shouldn't be doing, or that if I did something that unconsciously was hurtful in any kind of way. Over time, we, especially by working in team projects together, you get to learn the people, you get to understand what drives them and what motivates them, and how to interact with them. Well, and I think there was a similar experience for a lot of people who were at that school with me. We eventually ended up being a really strong team with people we check in with regularly today, and some of them have gone on to do really impressive things. One girl who was from Eastern Europe is now working with the federal government on international relations. We had this one person from Afghanistan who I haven't spoken to him in a bit, but I consider him a really close friend. He actually went back to Afghanistan to open a school, and then came back here and started a carpet business to help women back from his village, I believe. And they're arguably, for the most part, all more successful than I was in what they do with these international components, especially those coming from other parts of the world and who came into the United States to get a notion of what it was to be here, and then brought that back and started building upon it. I may have gotten a little bit lost in your question, but I hope I answered that.
No, I think that was valuable. I think the value of being adaptable and listening to other people, especially coming from other cultures and other countries. I think you definitely hit on that, and also the value too of visiting a new place and bringing that back to where you're from, right? I know for us in Kansas City, there's a number of organizations and businesses that you don't necessarily think are international, but you can do international work from just about anywhere. And I think your career demonstrates that.
Uh, for sure, you can yeah, it's funny because I'm probably 20, 30 years ago when we spoke of it, or I mean, I can't speak for 30 years ago, but 20 years ago when we spoke of international careers, really somebody, getting taken from location A and being brought to location B, and, they expats and all that. And that was kind of what international was. Nowadays with internet, with, social media and all that, it doesn't really matter where you are. International work is more or less accessible at your fingertips, given the right position.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I guess, since you had so many experiences internationally, I'd love to hear you talk a bit about, you know, how your travels, any advice you have for anyone interested in traveling, right? You mentioned that traveling really helped kind of build you into the professional you are. So, what advice do you have for young travelers and for people trying to kind of add that to their resume? Are there particular do's and don'ts about going to a new place and or anything like that you might want to share?
So, as a as a European speaking to Americans, don't be too American. Most part, for the most part, it can be really noticeable sometimes. But what I mean by that is, it's and I've come to learn this myself. When you're going somewhere, you're not. It's not you're going into somebody else's place. It's somebody else's home, and it's important to try to you know not only get a feel for it, but also just soak it in a little bit. And that takes a little bit of letting go of your own self and just trying to go with the experience rather than clinging so hard to whatever is important to you while you're out there. I think, the I know there can be fear of traveling in some areas, or going to, or a bit of reluctance to go to some parts of the world. While there are definitely dangerous places out there, for the most part, I think, we're all human, and we all have similar values, and it's not that difficult to get along with people regardless where you're going. I think it takes a bit of, being humble, understanding that you don't necessarily understand what it is um, that's difficult over there, but going there with the intention of understanding. And I mean, from a practical standpoint, for me, I found that the best way to travel is really to plan everything that's linked to actual traveling as much as possible. So, getting from point A to point B, having that all figured out, but then letting everything else just happen. Really get a sense, an experience of the area, try to get off the beaten path, if you will, of where all tourists goes, but really walk around and try to interact with people over there and things like that.
We have a question in the chat. Thank you, and I encourage all the audience members here to either shoot a chat message or unmute as appropriate. But hi, Alex. Based on your own experiences and those of your school peers, do you have any advice for recent graduates? Perhaps opportunities or experiences that you thought, if I had known about this when I had left school, that would have been an amazing experience.
That's a great question. So one thing I look back on and kind of wish I did was maybe take a little break between college and graduate school to do an internship. I had a few things out there that I could have done if I wanted to, but I decided not to. Which, looking back at it, I wonder if it was really the right decision, just because the internships, is not always the job you want per se, and not doesn't necessarily pay what you need to get out of it in order to survive, which was really the problem for me at that time. It's a fantastic opportunity with much less pressure to try something new, get a sense of it, and more importantly, gain experience. What people are going to look at whenever they're looking at your resume or your background is not just, okay, what school did she go to, or where did he study, or what job did they already do, but also just figuring out what experiences you have, what you can bring to the table that's going to be novel and that's going to bring something to the company, the organization, whatever. Just and having something that's a little bit out of the regular mold and out of the box is really helpful to stand out. For me, for example, the having that even small military experience has been helpful in some instances. The doing a little bit of international work through the Clinton School for a nonprofit organization definitely helped a little. And when I'm looking at, what some of the people I've known did, who, either tried to get an internship with the UN, for example, or things like that, it leads to some pretty interesting outcomes. So while there are while it's not necessarily always easy to get those, there are a lot of opportunities out there to either do work remotely or go in and travel somewhere to do. I don't actually, these days it's probably a bit more difficult with COVID, but the experiences that aren't necessarily on the beaten path and that won't necessarily lead to a dream job aren't necessarily, or shouldn't necessarily be disregarded just because they're not quite that, because the experience is valuable and it's going to make you stand out compared to other people. Having something different to claim is usually not a bad thing, even if it's not, the shiniest experience. It will set you apart from the crowd in general.
Yeah, I know. And I know you mentioned your military service, and in Switzerland, it's a bit different because it's kind of required. But I do know, for anyone interested, the United States, we have a number of programs similar, like the AmeriCorps, the Peace Corps, civil service programs, which encourage young folks and everyone really to do service and to work for their communities. And those are great ways to kind of add to your resume, along with, of course, military service and here in the United States. And
yeah, actually, a lot of people at the Clin School had done AmeriCorps or something like that at some point, and those were all great experiences too. They're fairly easy to access, especially for people going out and coming out of their education, and it's fantastic opportunity to just travel somewhere, do something for somebody else, and it's a great opportunity to grow. And again, it's an experience that's a little bit out there compared to what most people have, and definitely worth it. The UN also has a lot of internships, and then there are international organizations everywhere really. We here in Denver, we have an office for the other IRC, what is it, the International
rescue, is it the rescue committee?
Yes, thank you. It wasn't coming to me right away, but they have a lot of internships open out here. I was actually just looking at one because I've always been wanting to do something with the RSC. I was trying to figure out if I could squeeze in an hour or two of something with them, but unfortunately not. Anyway, the point is that they have work, that's right here in Denver, but that is international because you're helping them bring in people from other countries who are coming as refugees, and helping them with bringing those people in. And I think if I had if I was fresh out of grad school here in or college here in Denver, I'd probably be looking at that pretty heavily because it's interesting work, and I'm sure there are a lot. Kansas City has its fair share of international organizations that probably have internships to give, be it right here or somewhere else. The getting foreign internships isn't necessarily impossible, and especially if you still have the opportunity to go through your school, and maybe that they have opportunities already lined up for things like this.
Yeah, there are definitely, if you're Kansas City based, to anyone listening, there are definitely a number of organizations that you could volunteer with or intern with or possibly get a position with. We do have a couple resources on our website. Actually, I'll just plug them, that list some of these organizations and businesses and things like that. So I encourage you to check them out. But Alex, you talked about building bridges, right? And how that's really the skill that has kind of got you through all the different things that you've done. And I wonder, in that first interaction that you have with someone, like, what's your tips for making that connection and leaving that impression? What is it that you do that makes you so good at that?
It's
my secret.
my grandma always used to tell me we all poop the same way. When we'd see like celebrities on TV and I was like, wow, I want to be a rock star or something like that. She was like, they're nothing different. We all just, at the end of the day, we all poop the same way. And well, the metaphor is not necessarily the prettiest. It's extremely accurate. We're all human beings with our own struggles, with our own hardships. It's important to be cognizant of that. Somebody you're speaking to may seem like extremely rude and unpleasant. You don't know though. It may be they're perfectly kind people, but they're just having a bad day or they're going through something. And it's important to be, cognizant of that. And from that realization, it also brings you to a point where, you just want to be nice to people. I don't really care if they're being mean to me. I'd rather be nice to them because who knows what they're going through. And that's definitely something that's been helpful. I won't like pry in their life, but I do, I care, and I try to show kindness instead of anything else, regardless who I'm talking to or how the interaction is going. And I think that's always been a big part of it. I also, back to the we all poop the same way thing. I don't let people's status change my perception in any way, shape, or form. We're all human beings, and that goes for working with somebody that is scrubbing tanks in a chemical site, for example, or working with extremely high level executives at some of the biggest tech companies, like I was doing in my previous job. It doesn't necessarily at the end of the day, we're again all human, and that was a pretty big component of it too. I think just realizing that while we may all be different in a lot of ways, we also have a lot of commonalities that can be used in every single interaction to build rapport rather than just either exchange information or worse, like create some kind of conflict.
Absolutely. We are getting close to our time, so I just encourage anyone here or on Facebook, if you're joining us there, to shoot your questions to us via chat, or feel free to unmute yourself as we get closer to the top of the hour. But I guess, Alex, I have another question kind of about your traveling experience. You mentioned you'd been to many different countries and things like that, kind of during your college years or your younger years, and I guess could you share some of those experiences maybe that really were formative for you, and for some of our audience members who might not have yet had a chance to travel but are looking for reasons to do so?
Sure. So maybe one that that made a big difference for me, and it wasn't necessarily the travel component was part of it. Was this one summer. I think I was 14 or 15 at the time. Anyway, my mom knew a friend who knew people who had just bought a barn in very far south side of France, and that they were gonna turn it into a house, but they needed the all the guts of the house pulled out basically. And when my mom was telling me about that, I was like, well, I'll do it for them. If they can give me some tools and a bit of cash, I'll go do that. And so for 2 months I was out there on my own, living in this little cabin right next to the barn, just tearing the barn out. I didn't know anybody over there except one person who wasn't necessarily the person I wanted to be around the most. And so I really had to, that was maybe one of the first times where I was put out there on my own and had to figure things out for myself. I made a tiny bit of cash, but I had a room and board. And so that was a really interesting experience. And the fact that it was, manual labor, that it was not in the most comfortable conditions was also formative in a sense where I came to appreciate what it is I did have, and all the comforts I was accustomed to versus what I was given over there. So that was one of them. Another one so as a kid I was part of the Alpine Club in Switzerland, which is not that uncommon. Kids join this club I think it's organized by the state, and the whole point is just go spend weekends in mountains and things like that, and it's all paid for, and it's part of the school curriculum too. So it was pretty convenient. But anyway, I got really passionate about mountaineering through that time, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to go with this company group, corporate group that was leaving to go do a climb in Africa for the Kilimanjaro. And I was fortunate enough to get invited to join them. Because they were part of that Alpine Club program, and I was friends with some of the kids that were going to go out there. And so anyway, we went to climb that mountain, and that was a really interesting experience, not just because of the climb, but also because it was my first experience in Africa, and I came to see well, some of the people that were there, and we did a few days with locals who were showing us around and helping us get up the mountain. They it's such a different environment. It seems like there's way less, but at the same time they seem so happy for the most part. And coming from Switzerland especially, which is a closed off country for the most part. We're surrounded by mountains. We are a tiny country, smaller than most states in the United States, yet have a lot of wealth within the country. It's easy to forget, the realities of the world. And so going out there and, not only seeing that the conditions are extremely different, but also that the general mentality is extremely different. Opened my mind significantly, I would say, because all these things I thought were important, I came to realize weren't necessarily all that important. And all the little, things that bothered me, I came to realize I could totally get over them and be absolutely fine with them, because that's what a lot of people out there were doing. And it was pretty mind opening to me.
Yeah.
I think those were probably two pretty transformative trips.
Yeah. So we have another question, which I think is a great question, which is how has your methods of communication or communicating or making connections with people changed during COVID with everything switching to online mediums?
Well, it's changed a lot. I uh, I would say that, it used to be that people hated getting calls, because they got calls all the time. But now with everybody shifting over to online meetings and things like that, and this is, really meaningful to my job because getting in touch with people is kind of one of the big aspects of it. I've come to find that calling people is actually really cool. It used to be something that annoyed people, but now the not having the constraint of having to put on video and, just not having a scheduled call is actually something people are responsive to. So I'm not sure I'm answering that question totally, but what I can say is that, there are, people are behind their computers all the time now. They don't really go out anymore. They may have meetings and things like that, but anybody can be contacted, especially these days. If you can find somebody's phone number, which, if you Google search tricks, which are easy to look up, it's really easy to find anybody's phone number. If you're trying to get in touch with somebody, it's crazy easy these days to get in touch with basically anybody. And then in terms of communication, I mean, I try to do, if I need to have a scheduled call with somebody, I'll always try to do it with video camera so we can still see each other and have a little bit of an interaction, although it's not the same as physical. And in terms of making connections, I think, I've been having quite a bit of success with LinkedIn these days. I've been more active on LinkedIn and I've been making connections through that, but also just participating in, webinars, conferences, or events like this one have been pretty good ways to get in touch with people. And what's interesting about that is that since all of these events have shifted to online, for the most part, you can usually, if you're interested in something in particular, you can try to see if they have a conference or an event on that, join that, and then you'll be surrounded with people who are also interested in that and who are probably already in the midst of it, making it pretty easy to build connections, especially since they usually have a little networking aspect to it and all. So I've been exploring, just various things I've been interested in, but never really took time to dive in through these conferences and webinars just because they're available these days. Trying to think if there's anything else, but I would say, yeah, the again, if you're trying to reach somebody in specific, try finding the number and calling them. It's really not hard to find a phone number. And then, so I mean, social media is helpful, maybe more so now than it used to be, just because people spend more time behind their screens than maybe ever before, really. And the conferences can be really valuable because they're all happening online now. It's usually, typically these conferences are in a specific area like Vegas or something, and then you got to pay a lot of money to get in. And it's a whole logistical thing, so it makes it inaccessible for most people. With them being online now, you can get all, at least some of the value that you would get from those conferences, which is being able to interact and meet people um, and hear people who have knowledge speak about a specific topic. But but you also have the, without all the difficulties of having to travel or pay for the ticket and all that. So I definitely encourage, even if there's a speaker you're interested in at a conference, it's really easy to send them a message afterwards, and most of the time they will answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think the number of resources and opportunities and conferences and lectures has exploded now that we've been online for so long. We're getting close to our time. Alex, thank you for sharing so much. I want to, before I close us off, I want to leave you the chance to share any final words of wisdom that you might have gotten over the course of your career with our audience members who are watching right now and who are watching later on. Do you have any final takeaways about building an international career and communicating and anything like that?
I think, the opportunity thing I was mentioning earlier is a big one. If you see something you're interested in, if you see something you want to do, even if it seems far-fetched, it's worth giving a try. If it won't take too much of your time, it doesn't matter if you most likely are not suited to do what it is you're trying to do. It's worth a try because you might just end up being able to do it. You don't get anything if you don't try, and it's especially true in this field. There are opportunities where you might think, okay, this is way out of my league, but really it's not. Or you might just be the right candidate, or they might have nobody else, applying for or trying to do this. So it's worth trying. And then, kind of tying into that, I think being bold is pretty important, especially nowadays. Having the ability to put yourself out there and get noticed, or just go after what you want, regardless of whether it necessarily makes sense or seems feasible, I think is pretty important, especially trying to pierce an international career. we going back to we're all human beings. I think it's as a kid I was pretty shy. I would talk myself out of a lot of things until I came to realize that it doesn't really matter. I can try, I can fail, and if I do, then it's gonna happen. I'll get back up and try something new. I think being bold is really something that a lot of people could benefit a little bit from, because there are a lot of really smart people out there who are just stopping themselves because they don't necessarily have the confidence to go out and explore the world, which for the most part I think everybody does. Be bold, I guess, would be my final thought.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for being here, Alex, and also our participants today for donating your time and providing so much interesting information about kind of an international career and what it might take. We'd like to thank everyone for their continued support of the IRC. So I'd like to close by putting a plug in for some of our upcoming programs. In particular, next week we have a lexicon on the Arabic culture and language, a news and views conversation on exploring peace in a world of conflict, and an international career series like this one, this time on exploring careers in the energy sector. So if you're interested in any of those activities or anything else on the IRC, we encourage you to check out our website for more information, irckc.org. There you can also find a link to our YouTube channel where you'll be able to find a full recording of this conversation in case you'd like to revisit it, alongside many other conversations like this one. Thank you so much again for being here today, to our guests and to Alex. There's some thank yous in the chat, so it sounds like everyone enjoyed hearing from you today. We hope everyone stays well, and we hope to see everybody soon.
Thanks, everybody.